Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Bookish Clan. You already know my name, Emmanuel Ebo, and I have Miss Sonia. Hello.
Hello to you.
How you doing?
I'm fine. Hello, listeners.
Is it hello to you from you?
Another day of the Bookish Clan, and I'm very excited as always.
I think the energy is low today, but maybe because of the book.
No, we're just serious. You can even tell from our setting. This is a very serious setting. We're talking about serious business.
It's
Can't
called,
be laughing anyhow.
It's called 1984. From the
Can
title
you hear
says
the year? Such a serious year.
1984.
Like 2010.
You know when I heard 1984, I'm like, who names their novel 1984? I'm like, what could this be about?
Actually, there's like this thing to it.
Yeah.
He wanted to name it The Last Man in... Was it in Europe? The Last Man in Europe. But for the sake of commercial appeal, his editor advised you should call it 1984. So yeah, that's what actually happened.
It's appealing actually, if you ask me. It is.
Yeah.
If you see it,
It's quite a catchy name.
It is.
Surprisingly.
1984.
It's an unnecessary year to just have lodge in your head.
Well, last time we talked about Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm sure by now you must have watched that video and you might have read this novel with us, this new week. 1984 was written by George Orwell. And before we proceed, Sonia is going to give us a quick rundown of who George Orwell is. Sonia.
Eric Arthur Blair, better known by his pen name George Orwell, was an English author and journalist. His work is marked by keen intelligence and wit, a profound awareness of social injustice, a passion for clarity in language, and a belief in democratic socialism. In addition to his literary career, Orwell served as a police officer, with the Indian Imperial Police in Burma from 1922 to 1927, and fought with the Republicans in Spanish Civil War from 1936 to 1937. Between 1941 and 1943, Orwell worked on propaganda for the BBC. In 1943, he became a literary editor of the Tribune, a weekly left-wing magazine. He was a prolific polemical journalist, article writer, literary critic. He was a lot.
Yeah, it was quite a lot. Well, I can see what inspired some of the...
Yeah, from his writings and the different things like the ministries.
The fact that he worked for propaganda for the BBC.
He actually didn't like to work, I think it was just more like something he had to do because he didn't have any other thing to do. Because I was watching a couple of facts on 1984 and was told that the writer didn't actually love his work being a propaganda writer for BBC
at the same time, his experience might have inspired.
Yeah, many of his experiences actually inspired. Actually, things that had to do with the book has we're going to get to the things, but things about classes, the class ranges from the middle class, upper class, and lower class. He had been really marginalized growing up. In fact, I think his studies for secondary school were actually based on scholarship. He didn't have money to go to university, so he had actually gone through so many things. I think that's what led him to push a lot for socialism. You can find out a lot of themes of his book. Even in Animal Farm, he had a lot of political thoughts and how socialism was what he really, really wanted as a better form of ruling instead of totalitarianism, which was a major theme in 1984.
Well, about the book 1984, it is a dystopian novel set in a society under totalitarian rule. It's called Oceania anyway, and the story is set in Oceania, one of the 3 super states where the party led by Big Brother exerts total control over the people. The protagonist, Winston Smith, works at the Ministry of Truth, and it's so funny what Ministry of Truth is, I'll get to that, where he alters historical records to align with the party's propaganda. So Winston grows disillusioned with the party's oppressive regime and begins a secret affair with Julia, sharing his rebellious thoughts. However, their descent is short-lived as they are betrayed and captured by the Thought Police. When you hear Thought Police, I don't know what comes to your mind, but we'll get to that. And that's the simple, short summary of this book yet, before we now dive into the major themes and all of the characters and all that. So, Sonia, what was your primary, impression of 1984 by George Orwell?
First of all, I was like, people can shy, imagine. George Orwell, do you understand how many, it's low-key a complex book because the things are so complex,
so multi-layered.
Yes, it's not easy to write a political book and have it to be so engaging. Most of the political books we have are more like biographies or just reports on things that have already happened. And this is him, because the way he's writing it is like looking into the future of totalitarianism, what's gonna happen, and yet it's so engaging, so amazing, so many layers to the book, so many ideas that he's able to convey through 1984. I'm just thinking, this man is a writer.
When we're discussing Atomic Habits, you said there are writers and there are writers. This man, is he a writer or a writer?
He's in a class of his own. No. He's not even in those two. He's the OG of writers. And to think that he didn't write so many books in his lifetime. But for years and years to come, 1984 would always be a classic. Always. Like the ideas in the book. And I feel like even regardless of like whatever rule your country practices, in some way you can low-key relate to some of the ideas in the book. It's really an amazing one. It's a classic for ages.
And all of his works are quite like that. Animal Farm. I mean, that was his first work that I read. Animal Farm. Before I read 1984.
Not all animals are equal.
Some animals are more equal than others. I can't imagine what's going on in that man's mind. How does he come up with those things?
I think it's really how he has been able to. He was really. There's some people that just go through these things. He was born in a time where there were so many wars.
Yeah.
He was born. I think in his lifetime he probably experienced the Second World War. So he was born in a time where he really, really felt the effects of wars, of different kinds of ruling, like socialism, communism, different things like that. Even to the point of he was even part of. I think we talked about him serving with the Spanish Civil War, part of like the forces behind them, one of the people like opposing Stalin at that point in time. So he was really, his influences were very thick, politically thick. So when he was able to write, he was really able to convey these ideas with so much clarity, put it that way. So he had a lot of influences from the time he lived. Because imagine someone like us trying to write a dystopian novel from 1940 something or something. It would be so difficult.
And I really feel like I've read somewhere anyway where it was written that novel was like a warning to people about the dangers of
totalitarianism, not to embrace it, to be vigilant. To be very vigilant on your
it doesn't quite take a lot before you see it. Governments can actually overtake.
Yes, and they don't have to necessarily call themselves totalitarians to overtake or to make you start watching what you say, what you think. It's literally happening all around us. You have to be careful with things you put on. You cannot just come out and say something about your government, even if they're doing something wrong. You cannot necessarily just say it that way.
That even reminds me of Ade Coca in Papa Hibiscus, the first novel we analyzed, how Ade disappeared.
And it was still like the same thing. They had civil war at that point in time. It was like a little closely related to the themes currently going on.
And we've seen all over the world how people disappear just for criticizing government. That person could be a journalist, anybody.
Especially with journalists.
Yeah, just disappear from nowhere just for saying or writing something against the government of the day. But let's move on to the characters here in 1984. And of course, the primary character, the protagonist.
Winston. A very amazing character.
Amazing. Was he amazing? Yeah, he was amazing.
He was an interesting character, rather. Yeah. He was a very interesting character. I think in line with what George Orwell intended for the name of the book to be Last Man in Europe, it actually makes a lot of sense. It felt like he was the only person sitting in Oceania who really was thinking, who was noticing things, and it felt like nobody else was like paying attention to what was going on. Nobody was being vigilant. Nobody could remember the past because it felt like they had control of the present, the past, and the future. And then there was Winston just stuck there in the Ministry of Truth, and I think because of his access to materials. Because they had to keep on. Ministry of Truth, by the way, was in charge of publications.
And just before we continue, let's establish some background about the ruling party.
Because we can't actually talk about the book without talking about
that ruling party is in charge of everything and everybody.
Your air, your water, your food, your life.
They control even the thoughts you think.
Yes.
They control how you keep your face. Because even a little twist of your face can get you arrested.
Vaporized in terms of how the book calls it.
Yeah. Any idea or anything that suggests in any way that they're trying to kind of oppose the government, overthrow the government, or even encourage other people to do the same can get you arrested. And if that happens, you don't want to know what the experience is. We'll get to that anyway. We'll get to the Ministry of Joy. And of course,
that's not very joyful.
Joy will not get joy.
Yes.
Just like truth, when they're truthful, I don't know.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's the point. So this party, the ruling party, were in charge of the life of the people. There were telescreens everywhere that monitors what you're doing, the food you eat, how you react to things, how you keep your face. And there's always that inscription with the face of Big Brother that says
Big Brother was literally the symbol of the government.
And it says Big Brother is watching you. And in reality,
Big Brother was actually watching.
Yeah.
And we had like 3 classes of people.
Yeah.
We had 3 classes. The ruling party, which were like the maybe 2% of the population.
Yeah.
They were the ones who literally controlled everything.
Mm-hmm.
Big Brother was more of a symbol, just like having like, let me say, a coat of arms.
Yeah.
Big Brother was like the coat of arms of Oceania, just to make people always feel like there was someone,
one all-powerful
yes.
being somewhere
yes,
who is in charge and monitors.
Possibly there was really no Big Brother as a person. It was more of an ideology. Then there was the middle class, which was where Winston fell into.
Yeah.
So they worked closely with the ruling party. They worked in ministries.
Yeah.
So they had to be constantly watched, because obviously when you're working with the ruling party, it was essential that you were sort of, propagating their ideas, making sure that the ideas were what every other person was going to be doing.
Yeah.
Then we had the working class people, the people in the lower class, and we call them the pros. In the book, they call them the pros, P-R-O-L-E-S.
Yeah.
They're called the pros. They didn't really care a lot about what the ruling party was saying.
Because they've been distracted with gambling, with pornography.
So many things. The government had it so under lock. Like, no, that book. Hey, if there was actually a government like that in this life, let me just tell you, it would work. Because the way they had it, the way the ruling party was working was such as they controlled everything. They controlled the middle class by ensuring that there were telescreens, which were like little TVs that saw everything you were doing. So the telescreen will come on and tell you time to exercise. And if you were not exercising with, maybe you were distracted, it could shout your name. Yeah. And he did at the point in the book. He said, Winston, and then Winston was like, oh my God, they will soon catch me. And then he went back to what he was doing.
and I think that inspired most of this Big Brother story, Big Brother Nigeria.
There's literally like about facts about the book was that Big Brother is actually what's the word? It is influenced by the Big Brother in 1984. Because Big Brother is literally just this surveillance, like it just watches everything you're doing. Your single move, what you're thinking, what you're saying. So every reality TV shows we have now called Big Brother is actually like drawn from the idea of Big Brother in 1984. So we have the pros, like we said, the working class people who they are on is they're just distracted. they don't even have time to think. So nobody even cares about them. Because it's like, okay, if you keep them distracted enough, they won't really have time to think about what we are doing, how our government is. So the major problem in society is actually that middle class.
Yeah.
Because the middle class is low-key, they have access to information, and you have to be sure that the information that they're having, you can control them with it. You have to keep them under control. So I think those are the major things you have to put in place.
And of course, there was the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood was like the opposition. Well, let's say...
It was... supposedly the opposition,
because from what we've learned so far in this book, it is possible that there was no brotherhood.
Exactly.
Because the ruling party can as well create fake oppositions here and there just to keep people at bay. Yes, and ensure that people are not thinking of the major problems. Just focus on the
slogan says war is peace.
War is peace.
Slavery is freedom. And I think they had a third one. I can't remember the third one, but basically war is peace, slavery is freedom, and then there was one other thing that was also the opposite of what it was. So that was what they kept on doing.
And that was the entire idea of double think.
Yes.
Which means you can believe 2 opposing ideas at the same time. You can believe that freedom
is slavery, and slavery is freedom.
2 things that are opposing.
Oppression is freedom. Freedom is oppression, like that.
War is peace. I wonder how that works. But then that was how they were conditioned. Their minds were conditioned to think in this way. And they had what they called the newspeak. The newspeak was like the language introduced by the ruling party to ensure that they control how people think, the language in which you think. And the people did not have the right to use their own language. There was no freedom of independent thinking. You're not allowed even to think on your own. So they made sure that whatever you're thinking, whatever you're saying is what the government wants you to think, what the government wants you to say. Just like we mentioned earlier, freedom is slavery, or slavery is freedom, war is peace. They made sure, through the Ministry of Truth, that they control the narrative all the time. They could create fake opposition at any point, fake people, just like we said, the Brotherhood, who was led by this imaginary Emmanuel Goldstein, who never appeared anywhere in the book, but we were made to believe that he was, the leader of the opposition.
Was trying to cause a revolution.
Yeah, and of course, the ruling party made sure to paint him as someone that you should hate, someone that should never be like, don't aspire to be like.
Like literally an enemy of the brother of the ruling party.
He was wanted, sort of. Well, I'm not imagining, since he was wanted, and given how controlled the entire system was, it could have been easy to capture him if he actually existed, don't you think? Because they had control over everything and everybody. I think if Emmanuel Gosling was in Oceania,
perhaps
example,
it wasn't in Oceania. Perhaps it was made to look like as if even if he was there, he was maybe running in the darkness. Maybe he was living with the pros. It was all about ideology. Basically, it was feeding people. Basically, the Ministry of Truth was just made to keep on recycling truth and lies. Mm-hmm. So if today the Ministry of Truth had said that we caught Goldstein exists, mm-hmm. and maybe he existed, and then they not killed him. Tomorrow, if you suddenly want to make him their alive, they'll destroy every publication they have ever written that said that he was alive or they killed him, and they will now recycle the truth and say that this is the new truth. This Goldstein man we're talking about today, his name is Silverstein. Anything they want to feed you is what they feed you.
They could revise or spin history.
And that was where
Winston
worked. Winston worked in making sure that everything changed. So if today the Eurasia, they had an opposition, a different continent, Eurasia. Eurasia was made to always be fighting with Oceania. So if today Eurasia won the war, and that's what they posted last week, and they want to say today it was Oceania that won the war, it was not Eurasia. Winston will have to work on all the editions for the next maybe couple of days. It was a very, very busy ministry, by the way. They will have to work for the next couple of days, lying that, no, even though we said that was it before, what was actually it was this. And because you're not allowed to think, anything that you're giving, you just have to take
it. Just swallow it, hook, line, and sinker, whatever they tell you.
And that's where I think his internal conflict started. Because it's like, but I know what I saw last week now. This was what happened. Why are you telling me that today, this is the new truth?
And somehow it's his job to revise that truth.
Yes.
So you had this internal conflict.
And like to ensure that the people in Ministry of Truth would even forget, they have something called the memory hole. Yeah. So once you are done and get maybe an old publication, you throw it down the memory hole. It's like something that will go to an incinerator and burn everything up. It was a crazy thing. Then there was also the Ministry of Love, which was basically concerned with torturing people. So all the bad people that like to go and be thinking, that's a problem in this book. You are not supposed to think. So if you're mistakenly caught having thought crime, which was basically a crime where you were thinking, or face crime, maybe your face gave you away.
Maybe your face suggests that you don't like Big Brother,
yes,
or that you hate the ruling party.
Exactly. You
just
could be
by
arrested.
your face, so
you could be arrested by the thought police. The thought police were basically the police in charge of your thoughts. If they found out that you were doing anything, they would arrest you and then they'll take you to the Ministry of Love. Because actually, at the end of the day, you have love because you love Big Brother. That's the whole point of coming to the Ministry of Love. They might torture you, but the point is, at the end of the day, you love Big Brother.
Then the Ministry of Joy, which was more like a prison.
Okay, that's where they keep you.
Where they keep you and what they call re-educate you, sort of, kind of break your spirit and make sure that you renounce whatever you believed before. Now believe that Big Brother is the ultimate. Believe the ruling party, and they just make sure that they break your spirit and make you become one of them, love them, and remove all kind of independent thinking from you. That was what the Ministry of Joy was established to do. So you see, more like everything was the opposite of what the name stands for. Ministry of Truth was all about lies and propaganda. Ministry of Joy was all about torture and imprisonment and this re-education, which means like to break your spirit and make you to think in a different way than you thought before. And that's quite I don't know how to put it, but wow, I can't imagine being in such a society at this point. But then I think it's even happening one way or the other in our recent societies where people revise history. You hear that something happened today, somehow someone come out and tell you that it didn't happen, and they keep debating it. We can't really go into such details, but we know what I'm talking about. When people actually deny history. People deny history. People deny where they come from. Maybe today that we originated from the east. Well, they say no, our origin is from the west. More they still change and say no, our origin is from the north. So people keep on reversing history here and then just to suit their own personal interests or their own selfish interests, and it's almost always championed by people in power for their own selfish interests. The poor people don't even care. No, they don't care. They are too busy fighting poverty to actually think think for themselves and fight for their future. So I think that was the idea of this whole book. And yeah, we've talked about Winston Smith. I mean Smith. I don't know why I just said sweet anyway, but Winston Smith, he was like the protagonist and the primary character of this book. The entire story revolves around him at the end of the day.
Yeah, what he's thinking, how he's like literally filtering everything that comes his way.
So since he was working in the Ministry of Truth, he began to have this internal conflict, and he became quite rebellious in his mind to start with. So he began journaling. He bought
which you're not supposed to do in Australia.
How dare you journal?
Because journaling means that you're keeping stock of past and present events, meaning that you have a frame of reference, and you're not supposed to have a frame of reference.
You're just supposed to swallow what the government is saying today.
That was his first act of rebellion, buying that diary. And we're going to talk about who he bought the diary from.
It is well though.
In a dystopian world such as 1984, everybody's your enemy.
Everybody's a suspect.
Everybody's a suspect.
You cannot trust anybody.
Everybody.
Because the way things turned out.
Because literally in the book we have cases of children reporting their parents for thought crime.
Yeah.
We have cases like that.
Although we are going to get to how the themes of this book, let me quickly check because I might forget it.
Yeah.
How that ruling party actually kind of undermined the family structure.
That was the whole point. You're not supposed to have any love for anybody but the ruling party.
By recruiting children into what they call the junior spies.
There was I think a junior sex league.
Yeah.
There was that. That was where Julia was when she was younger, before she moved to the Ministry of.
So imagine your own children being spies on you. They spy on their parents.
So if you came home one night and said, "This Ministry of Truth, the people they are just so wicked. I hate Big Brother." Next morning you hear pom 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 pom, and the first police is there carrying you. Like that was the whole point, to make sure, because the way families were formed, they were not trying to form them to love one another or to be one integrated.
These are close-knitted kind of structure
not like
that we have.
It wasn't like that. It was just to ensure that there was procreation and generations kept on coming, not necessarily to have any close.
Probably more people to recruit into the workforce to make money for the ruling party.
Because obviously you cannot rule anybody if there's nobody. Yeah. So it was just for procreation. It wasn't necessarily for anything.
Not for even sex, for example, for them.
It was control.
It's not for pleasure.
It was literally the Ministry of, I think it was the Ministry of Love or something, had to know you were about to before you do so. Yes, because it was purely for procreation and not for pleasure.
And not for pleasure. You're not allowed to have sex.
You could not have emotional attachment
with anybody or for anybody.
You can't fall in love. Love is wrong.
How dare you?
Oh my goodness.
I mean, it's crazy.